Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
One of the 5 most effective members of the U.S. Congress, Garret Graves, joins us when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Louisiana businesses, by partnering with your local community and technical college foundation, you're guaranteed a skilled, highly competent workforce, homegrown talent, trained specifically to meet your needs, whatever those needs are. Visit this website to learn more about how to partner with your local Louisiana Community and Technical College Foundation. To better prepare for tomorrow, become a partner today.
Protect yourself from the headaches of dealing with a non-licensed contractor. Go to lacontractor.org and make sure the person or company who wants to work for you is licensed by the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. It's your money. Make wise decisions and protect yourself.
Growing up in Baton Rouge, I used to always pass up ExxonMobil, but I never thought that I would actually have the opportunity to get on. But what I thought was impossible turned out to be possible. So I just feel like it's just a wonderful opportunity to be able to provide for my family.
We are committed to being a community partner. We are actively working to recruit the talent here in Baton Rouge, and we want to bring them into our workforce. We're ready.
Louisiana has over 26,000 licensed companies that do business legally and meet the needs of our state. Before selecting a contractor, check references and verify the license at lacontractor.org. It's your money. Make wise decisions and protect yourself from being scammed.
For 8 seconds in the arena before an afternoon in the field. For a promise to students that honors success in the classroom. For championships earned on the bayou. For innovators committed to reclaiming our coastline. The Universities of Louisiana. For your future. For our future.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Congressman Garret Graves is our guest. Buddy, welcome back. It's good to have you.
Hey, great to see you again.
It's always an interesting conversation. You and I were talking before we started taping this morning about the political environment in Washington. I've been following politics for most of my career. It's as bad as I've ever seen. It's caustic, but somehow you have shown the ability, Garret, to work across the aisle and get things done. In fact, voted one of the top 5 most effective members of Congress. Talk a little bit about that environment, what you see, and maybe how we move back to a more civil discourse.
Sure. Well, look, first, Tim, I think that you're exactly right. There is a growing disconnect between reality, what's happening on the ground, the core needs of the community, and what people are talking about on TV and in Washington, D.C. I mean, I tell our Washington team, you need to fly home as often as possible because you've got to get out of this unrealistic place, this vacuum, and go spend time with real people, real communities across the state of Louisiana and understand what the real priorities are, what the things you need to be working on. And that's one thing, is just trying to stay as grounded as possible with reality and real people. Number 2 is, and this one may sound a little weird, but bear with me for a minute. Look, I sit there in these hearings and on the House floor sometimes, and I'm watching these people talking and listening to them like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe this person's even saying this. But I've tried really hard to, one, respect the fact that, look, they were elected by 700,000-800,000 people just like we were. And the other thing is I'll go up to them after and say, hey, you know what? I'd love to go to your district, and I'd like for you to come to our district. And there are a few people that ideologically couldn't be more different. But I brought them down here and said, look, I'm not trying to convince you to vote like we do or say what we say, but I do want you to see who it is and what it is that we represent and why we fight for the things that we do. And that's been a really powerful thing, is bringing those people here, Republicans and Democrats. We brought dozens and dozens. In fact, I think we counted maybe 50. We've brought down here Republicans and Democrats and shown them our traffic problems and our coastal land loss and our energy industry and fisheries and how we have the ports and the river and just all of these issues down here that we spend a lot of time working on. And that's been really helpful and resulted in us being able to get a good bit more stuff done, I think, than the average person.
You mentioned having your staff fly back to the district to keep them grounded. you work to help keep them grounded. But I know how critically important a quality staff is to any operation, and you've got a great one. Paul Sawyer, the whole team. Talk about the quality of your team, Congressman, and what they mean in terms of your ability to be as effective as you are.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because when people come in, sometimes you'll see people that, I want to hire a staff that knows Washington and knows the people at the agencies and how to get legislation done and all that. And you see them do that, but then oftentimes the people who do that, the things they're advancing don't reflect the priorities at home. And I think one of the most important things is having people that know South Louisiana, that know the people, that importantly know their limitations and who to call. Hey, I'm not a healthcare expert. Let me call these folks to find out what the deal is in Louisiana. And so that's really important. And yeah, our Chief of Staff, Paul Sawyer, has been amazing. And our long-term district director, David Cavell, we've got a great legislative director, and she's just knocking it out of the park, and our Washington staff, but our entire team just making sure that they know home, that they not just know home, but have this connection that you just can't sever, to where they love Louisiana and they really care about the future. It is critical. And yes, you got to find that balance of people who know the intricacies of getting things done, but I feel like that part of it is teachable. The part of it that you can't teach is just this deep love for Louisiana, to where, as I said, it's something that you can't sever, you can't disconnect from, to where when people are fighting and thinking through, it's personal. It's not, hey, this is my 9 to 5 job. It's personal, and that makes a big difference.
These are my family, and this is my family. These are my friends. Let me run through the litany here. Pandemic, floods, hurricanes, energy policy and gas prices, inflation, war in Ukraine, all of these things in the economy affecting real people all across this country. Talk about the current state that you see in terms of the U.S. economy, and then also how you believe we can move back toward more balance and a more inclusive economy for everyone.
So Tim, I'm gonna rephrase a little bit, because I think sometimes when folks use the term balance, it's communicated as caving, and one side. I don't think we have to do that. I think what we've got to do, looking back over history, I think that decades from now, historians can be looking back and call this one of the most challenging periods in American history. All of these compounding issues. What's happened, I think, is that we have moved more to an emotional government structure, rather than just looking at data to help inform what's the right decision here. And so, you probably could compare it to giving candy to a kid and getting them, that sweetness, that dessert, and excited for a little while, or even a little bit more harsh, giving crack to a drug addict, to where there may be a temporary feeling of, this feels good. But long term, these aren't the right decisions. And let's throw out some examples there. Look what we're seeing right now with the southern border. I saw a statistic the other day saying that there are 1 million more people. 1 million, that's nearly a quarter of the state of Louisiana's population. 1 million more people living here. And in many cases, and you can look at the data, this isn't me just out there, you can look at the data. In many cases, these are people that are becoming wards of government. We're coming in and we're having to pay to educate. Not just educate, but because of all the diversity in languages, we've got to hire native language speakers for these people, adding additional expense within schools. We've got to cover healthcare. We've got to cover housing. We've got to cover food. So taxpayers are taking on all of this burden. Now, is that me saying, hey, to heck with these people? No, I'm not saying that. But I don't think the solution is bringing them into our country and unfettered access and just open borders and then making them our financial responsibility. I think there's solutions we can be working with their governments back in their own countries and helping to address some of those issues.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll pick up with that conversation. We're visiting with Congressman Garret Graves. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Shell, the rhythm of Louisiana.
As humankind faces its most critical challenges yet, the world demands leaders, and LSU is taking up the charge. The research we do here goes everywhere to protect communities threatened by climate change, so you can live your life with fewer worries about tomorrow. We're formulating a better way for everyone. Because at LSU, our calling is humanity.
Plants would not be operating if they weren't operating under the regulations to keep everybody safe and keep the environment safe.
It also goes back to the end products that our raw materials go into. Solar panels, windmills.
Reusable bottles. Primary product is acrylonitrile, which is used to make carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber in an airplane is used to make it lighter.
By reducing weight, we indirectly help the environment because it uses less fuel. And for us to make products that help reduce carbon footprint, it's a big deal.
Shell, the rhythm of Louisiana.
So, how can I help you today? Maybe you're looking for a bigger home. Maybe you have plans to grow your business. Or maybe all your plans have just changed. For the better. Whether you're planning for the future or just looking for a bank that cares about you. If you have a goal, let's make it happen.
This is what you're looking for.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Louisiana Congressman Garret Graves is our guest. Garret, we ended the last segment talking about making data-based decisions in terms of how we spend our resources in government. And you mentioned the border and the crisis that has been and the number of people that it's added. But there are a lot of areas where we're making emotional decisions rather than objective data-driven decisions. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, I mean, look, another perfect example in addition to the border, which, by just make note, America lets more immigrants in than any other country in the world. So we're doing our part. But another example is an energy space, something you and I have spent a lot of time talking about over the years. Look, Louisiana, we are blessed with abundant resources, and you've seen this increasing attention paid toward cleaner energy sources and climate change, which I believe we need to spend time focused on. But as you said, we've got to look at data. We've got to look at facts. I'll give you a statistic that most people don't realize. United States, for many years, we reduced emissions more than the next 12 emissions-reducing countries combined.
Say that again.
Over about a 15-year period, we reduced emissions more than the next 12 emissions-reducing countries combined. More recently, we're reducing emissions more than about the next 7 emissions-reducing countries combined. The United States is leading the world. There's been this bullseye that's been put on oil and gas. Oil and gas is not the enemy. We need to look at emissions. And as we've demonstrated right here at home, we have complementary technologies like carbon capture, storage, utilization, direct air capture, to where you can use natural gas to make electricity at market rates with net zero emissions. That makes it indistinguishable from any other clean energy source, whether it's nuclear, solar, wind, wave, geothermal, whatever. We can make it indistinguishable. And so what that does is it allows Louisiana to help supply, whether it's Germany or Spain or other countries in Europe or Asia, supply them energy, not Vladimir Putin, where some of those countries today that are providing military assistance to Ukraine, they're spending up to $1 billion a day buying energy from Vladimir Putin at the same time. How do you do that? How do you do that with a straight face? And so it's another example where good, thought out, data-driven energy policy in the United States, one, can create more jobs here, more economic activity here. It can kneecap Vladimir Putin and some of these other authoritarian regimes out there. You got people saying, hey, we need to immediately move everything to wind and solar. That plays right into China's hands. How about thinking about America? How about thinking about stats, data figures, and looking at how we can achieve both a clean energy future and make sure that it's U.S.-based or even Louisiana-based? Huge opportunities for us.
But you bring up a topic there, Congressman, that you and I have also discussed over the years. And this idea that we've lost in government, that two things can be true at once. It can be true that we need to pay attention to climate change while we protect our existing industry. It can be true that we need to look at cleaner, more efficient sources of energy while we protect our oil and gas. Why have we lost, particularly in Washington, D.C., this ability to look at an issue and understand that two things can be true at once?
It's because we've really deviated from just looking at facts and data to drive our decisions. It's because we've moved into this emotional area to where people are looking at polar bears on TV and said, oh, well, gosh, we've got to do this. Look, think about this for just a minute. We're watching Vladimir Putin out there indiscriminately kill tens of thousands of innocent civilians. Do you really think that he's going to care about emissions reduction in Russia? Do you really think that in China that Xi is going to go out there and say, oh, well, we've got to reduce emissions versus thinking about what's best for his economy? No. And so what we've got to do, the solution here is making sure that we have affordable clean energy solutions, which in many cases, natural gas can both achieve absolute ideal cleanliness objectives and can be one of the lowest cost energy streams. And so you can achieve everything and you're not wrecking Louisiana's economy. And so just being a little bit more strategic about how we move forward with an all-of-the-above energy strategy that uses some of our resources here, as well as continues to increase the uptake of wind and solar and others.
I've used a comment that I saw you make in a Wall Street Journal piece that appeared a little over a year ago, and this whole idea that it is industry with its research development and its deep pockets that is driving solutions to some of the world's most pressing environmental issues, right? It's not government. It's not, quite frankly, the activist, although they play a role. It is generally industry that is driving these solutions. Talk about that a little bit.
I'll just give you one story that I think says it all. President Obama set an objective, this thing called the Clean Power Plan. And he said, hey, we're going to reduce emissions by 30% by 2030. 30%. And President Trump came in, as you can imagine, and he said, we're not doing any of that stuff. So he gets rid of it. Despite the fact that President Trump got rid of it, President Obama had this objective in place and had chosen technological winners and losers. Government trying to choose which technologies are going to win. When Trump got rid of it, we didn't hit the goal in 2030. We actually exceeded the goal in 2019. Let me say that again, Tim. This requirement, this directive was removed.
We removed the government mandate and still met it 11 years early.
You met it, you exceeded it, but here's the thing. By allowing innovators to innovate, don't come in and try and predict the future, look in your crystal ball and say this is going to be the solution. Let innovators innovate. And by doing so, you exceeded it, you exceeded the affordability, and obviously you exceeded the time frame, as you noted. And so we've got to take the handcuffs off of innovators because that is how we're going to solve some of these challenges that are in front of us right now.
Let's take a break. We want to come back. I want to jump into some Louisiana-specific issues that you've been very focused on. We're visiting with Congressman Garret Graves. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Congressman Garret Graves is our guest. Congressman, infrastructure has been something that you've paid a lot of attention to during your time in Congress, even your time in the state, obviously with coastal restoration. Critically important to the nation, critically important to the country. You weren't a big fan of the recently passed infrastructure package, but there's some issues now that inflation might be causing with our ability to deliver what that bill had promised.
Look, the legislation had some good things in it. It had some flaws, but look, realistically on the ground right now, we're seeing project bids coming in 20 to 50% over estimate. So any additional funds that folks expected to receive, any lagniappe they expected to receive from the infrastructure bill, it's more than being eaten up as a result of inflation. And not just that, we're seeing folks that have put in a bid and say, look, this is good for 6 days because steel prices are so volatile, I can't even tell you what's going to happen down the road. This undermines one of the biggest challenges in Louisiana. Look, you've seen the stats, fourth worst traffic in America. I mean, the fact that we're competing with cities like Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and Miami is absurd when you look at our population. You mentioned coastal restoration, the greatest coastal wetlands loss in the continental United States. In fact, 90% of the coastal wetlands loss in the continental U.S. is happening right here. And this is threatening the greatest density of our economy, our people, our culture, a huge impact on us. We can have awesome businesses and schools and roads and churches and everything else. If they're underwater, they're useless. We've got to get hurricane protection and flood control and coastal restoration projects on the ground. We've been able to make some progress there. But look, all of this excessive spending that happened over the past few years, we're now paying for it. All of this, paying people more money to not work than work, we're paying for it. And it's going to cause interest rates to continue to go up, which means the debt service that this nation holds is going to start eating into everything from defense to infrastructure to education to healthcare to everything that the government actually needs to be doing and is a core responsibility.
You and I talked about this just briefly before the show started. And as a lifelong Republican, I hope and I know you are hopeful as well that the Republican Party can be the party of ideas going forward, not emotion, not necessarily completely focused on wedge social issues, but the party of real solutions to real problems, and we'll pay attention to that. I want to talk briefly about some Louisiana issues that you are heavily involved in, right? Hurricane relief, coastal protection, flood insurance. You are very active in focusing on the issues that matter to Louisiana citizens. Talk about some of those.
Tim, these are fundamentals. You know, I said a minute ago that we can have great schools, churches, jobs, economic engines, all those things. If they're underwater, it doesn't matter. If your home's underwater, I mean, it just totally uproots your life. We've got fundamentals that are core government responsibilities that we're failing at. And so we've got to focus on those things. And look, if we get those things done and we knock them out of the park, we can possibly begin looking at other things, but government's lost its focus and it's trying to be everything to everybody. And in many cases, you're way out of bounds on what you can afford. You're way out of bounds on what government responsibility is. So we've been able to secure about $8 billion in coastal restoration, flood control, and hurricane protection funds over the last few years, billions of dollars in new transportation investments, trying to get caught up to where we need to be, to where people can focus on their families, they can focus on their jobs, they can focus on their faith and other things that they need to be focused on and should be their priorities rather than thinking about how I'm going to muck and gut my home or if I'm going to have to evacuate for a week because we got an approaching storm.
Well, it goes back to the point that you and I have also discussed over the years, right? The government needs to set real priorities, fund those priorities adequately so that we can demand excellence from them. Anything else from a legislative perspective on the horizon or things that you're currently working on?
Well, you mentioned flood insurance, and that's another one. We're seeing failed government policy where they failed to keep up with flood protection resiliency investments, and now they're coming into states like Louisiana. We're looking at cases where they're trying to increase flood insurance rates from $560 a year up to $8,000. I mean, these are completely unaffordable rates. You're going to ultimately cause people, just kick them out of their home is effectively what this does. So we're working on trying to rein that back in. The awful policy that has not been thought through. The implications haven't been thought through. Working on additional flood protection legislation I think we're going to be able to get passed this year. Working on even some Jetsons type ideas like advanced air mobility and how we can bring new aviation technologies into the fold to help us address some of our infrastructure challenges here. So we got a lot of really neat things going on I think we're going to be able to get done this year.
There has been for a number of years now significant buzz around Garret Graves about the possibility that you would make a very good governor for the state of Louisiana, right? I know you don't necessarily like to talk about it because you're focused on the job you have, but are you considering it?
Right now, I'm focused on this job, and I don't want to be aloof with you at all. In fact, I'm going to hit it head on. I think this next governor's election is absolutely critical. You can look at the trajectory of the state. The largest component of our state budget right now, think about the listeners out there, the folks that are watching this, think about what you think the largest component of our state budget is. It's Medicaid. It's Medicaid.
Almost half.
We are headed toward a financially unsustainable trajectory. Tim, you think back, or you look back at Louisiana's history back in the early to mid 1900s. South Louisiana was the economic engine for this country. We were blowing away Houston, Dallas, Austin, Charlotte, Atlanta, Birmingham, and now looking, they're eating our lunch. The fundamentals that were strong there, they're still strong in Louisiana now, but we're not playing them right. Politicians for too long, I think, have made selfish or self-centered decisions, not the ones that are in the best interest of the state. So are we going to be playing in that governor's race in terms of trying to influence it? I guarantee you we will be. Whether we're going to actually be in the race, honestly, I have no idea. I don't, and my wife will tell you the same thing. But we've got to make sure that we knock it out of the park in this next governor's race, because otherwise I think Louisiana's future is in jeopardy.
We'll be watching that closely. 20 seconds left. Your message to Louisiana's business community.
Hey, look, you've seen, with uncertainty with COVID, you've seen some really challenging times that we've gone through. But let me say it one more time, the fundamentals for our state are really strong. We've been able to make amazing ground in recent years on addressing some of the infrastructure needs, and I think we've got good momentum behind us there. So this is going to be a great place to invest in. I think that you can look at issues like the fact that Louisiana has the highest value-added workforce in America. This is the place to invest. We've got a bright future, but we've got to make sure that we're holding people accountable to use stats, data, facts, and play our cards right in Louisiana.
Listen, man, it's always a great pleasure to have you on the show. I'm grateful for the work that you do for Louisiana.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Tim.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week for this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.